It was the way police work usually went. You put out a lot of nets, you checked them, and every so often, something was actually in one of the nets. More often than not, it came from a relative or friend of the perp, like an angry daughter who wanted retribution against her father. At 7:30, we entered the conference room at One Police Plaza and met up with several members of the NYPD, including the Chief of Detectives. I was the representative from the Washington Police, and I knew Kyle Craig was instrumental in getting me into the meeting. He wanted me to hear the girl's story firsthand. Kyle wanted to know if I believed her. Veronica McDougal was already in the large conference room. She wore wrinkled blue jeans and a ratty green sweatshirt. Her curly red hair was unkempt. The darkish puffy rings under both eyes told me she hadn't slept in a while. Veronica stared impassively at us as we introduced ourselves around a massive mahogany glass conference table inside what the NYPD called the Big Building. Chief of Detectives Andrew Gross then introduced the girl. "Veronica is a very brave young woman," he said. "She'll tell her story in her own words." The girl took a quick, deep breath. Her eyes were small green beads, and they were filled with fear. "I wrote out something last night, organized myself. I'll give my statement, and then there can be questions, if you want." Chief of Detectives Gross broke in gently. He was a heavy-set man with a thick gray mustache and long sideburns. His manner was subdued. "That would be fine, Veronica, however you want to do it. Take your time." Veronica began her story. "My father is what you people call a man's man. He's very proud of it, too. He's loyal to his friends, especially to other cops. He's this great guy, right? Well, there's another side to him. My mother used to be pretty. That was 10 years and 30 pounds ago. She needs nice things. I mean, she physically needs things, possessions like clothes and shoes. She's not the smartest person in the world, but my father thinks he's right up there, and that's why he picks on her, unmercifully. A few years back, he started to drink a lot, and then he started to get really mean, to hit my mother. He calls her the bag and speed bag." Veronica paused and looked around the room. She checked our reaction to what she was saying. "That's why I'm here today. That's how I'm able to do this terrible thing, to rat out my own father." She stopped and stared defiantly at us again. "My father doesn't realize that I'm actually a lot smarter than he is, and I'm also observant. Maybe I learned that from him. I remember when I was around 10 or so, I just knew I was going to be a police detective too. Pretty ironic, huh? As I got older, I observed, that my father had lots more money than he ought to have. Sometimes he would take us on a guilt trip. Ireland, maybe the Caribbean. And he always had money for himself. Really good clothes, fancy threads from Barney's and Saks. A new car every other year, a sleek white sailboat parked in Sheepshead Bay. Last summer, my father was disgustingly drunk one Friday night. I remember he was going out to Aqueduct Racetrack with his running dog detective pals on Saturday. He took a walk to my grandmother's house, which is a few streets away from us. I followed him that night. He was too far gone to even notice. My father went into an old gardening shed behind my grandmother's. Inside the shed, he moved away a workbench and some wooden slats. I couldn't tell exactly what he was doing, so I came back the next day and I looked behind the boards. There was money inside. A lot. I don't know where it came from, still don't, but I knew it wasn't his detective's pay. I counted almost $20,000, and I took a few hundred, and he never even noticed. I became more observant after that. Recently, over, say, the past month or so, my father and his friends were up to something, his Goombas. It was so obvious. They were always together after work. One night, I heard him mention something about Washington, D.C. to his pal Jimmy Cruz. Then he went away for 4 days. He got home on the 4th afternoon. It was the day after the Metro Hartford kidnapping. He started to celebrate at around 3. and he was flying high by 7. That night, he broke my mom's cheekbone. He cut her eye and could have put it out. I went to my grandma's shed that night, and I found more money. I couldn't believe it. There's so much money there. All cash. Veronica MacDougall reached under the table, and she hoisted up a powder blue backpack, the kind kids wear to school. She opened it. She pulled out several stacks of bills and showed us the money. Here's $10,400. It was right there in my grandmother's shack. My father put it there. My father was in on that kidnapping in Washington. I believed her, and I was still reeling from hearing Veronica MacDougall's chilling confession about her policeman father. An intriguing question was whether the crew of Brooklyn detectives had masterminded the earlier bank robberies, too. Was one of the detectives the mastermind? I had plenty of time to think about it, during an interminable day of politicking and infighting involving the FBI, the mayor, and the New York police commissioner. Meanwhile, the 5 Brooklyn detectives were put on surveillance, but we weren't given the go-ahead to bring them in. It was frustrating, maddening, like being stuck for a day on the Long Island Expressway in a traffic jam, or on a New York City subway. The detectives' attendance records were being checked against the days all of the robberies took place. Other detectives, even snitches, were quietly interviewed. Credit and spending checks were run on each of them. The money found at Brian MacDougall's mother's house had been retrieved, and it was definitely part of the ransom. As of 6 o'clock, nothing had been decided. Around 7, I went and checked into a hotel for the night. I took a hot shower in my room, and then I leafed through as a Gat's guide looking for a good place to eat downtown. Around 9, I finally ordered from room service. Betsy was tied up, raging against the machine at Police Plaza. I propped myself up in bed and tried to read. The phone in my room rang around 11 o'clock. It was Betsy. She sounded tired and frustrated, and decidedly non-peppy for her. "I'm just finishing up here at Police Plaza. I hope. Believe it or not, we're set to take them down tomorrow. I have to be here at least another hour. I'll see you in the morning. Early." 4 o'clock comes very early in the morning. That was the hour we were scheduled to hit the homes of the 5 detectives. Everything was set. 3:30 comes even earlier, and that was when we met somewhere in Nassau County, out on Long Island. I didn't know much about the area, but it was upscale and pretty, a far cry from 5th Street and Southeast. This was a federal case, and Betsy Cavalier was officially in charge of the arrests. "I'm happy to see everybody as bright-eyed and bushy-tailed this morning. Night," whatever time zone we're in. She offered up a joke and got a few smiles from the troops. There were about 40 of us, a mix of police and FBI, but the Bureau was definitely in charge of this morning's raids. She divided us into 5 teams of 8. I was in her group. Everybody was ready and incredibly pumped up. We drove to a ranch-style house on High Street in Massapequa. No one seemed to be up in the suburban neighborhood. Betsy spoke into her handy-talkie. "Radio check." Then, Team A through the front door. Team B, kitchen. Team C, sun porch. Team D is backup. "Now go! Take 'em down." The agents and police detectives swarmed toward the house on her signal. Betsy and I got to watch them quickly move in. We were Team D, the backup. Team A was inside the house fast and cleanly. Then so was Team B. We couldn't see the third team from where we were parked. They went in the back. They were shouting inside. Then we heard a loud pop. Percussive. Definitely a gunshot. "Oh, shit." She looked over at me. MacDougall was waiting for us. How the hell did that happen? There were several more gunshots. Someone yelled. A woman began to scream and curse. Was it Veronica MacDougall's mother? Betsy and I moved quickly toward the MacDougall house. We still didn't go inside. I was thinking that 4 other houses in Brooklyn were being hit right now. I hoped there wasn't more trouble like this. "Talk to me," Betsy said into her handy-talkie. "What's happening in there? Mike?" What the hell is wrong? Rice is down. I'm outside the master bedroom on the second floor. McDougal and his wife are inside. How is Rice? She asked. Chest wound. He's conscious. Wound is sucking bad, though. Get an ambulance here now. McDougal shot him. Suddenly, a window on the second floor opened. I saw a figure come out of the window and run in a low crouch across the attached garage roof. Betsy and I sprinted toward the man. He's outside. McDougal's up on the roof, over the garage, she reported to the others. I got him, I told her. He was angling toward where the garage roof intersected with a row of feathery-looking fir trees. I couldn't see what was beyond the trees, but I figured it had to be another yard, another house. McDougal! I yelled at the top of my voice. Stop! Police! Stop or I'll shoot! He didn't stop. McDougal jumped down into the trees. I ran with my head down, right through a barrier of thick bushes that scraped and cut my arms until there was blood. Brian McDougal hadn't gotten very far into the yard next door. I raced for a dozen steps after him, and then I tackled him. I aimed my right shoulder at the back of his knees. He went down hard, but he was as loaded up with adrenaline as I was. He rolled and twisted out of my arms. He popped up fast, and so did I. You should have stayed down, I told him. I hit McDougal with a hard, straight, overhand right. His head snapped back about 6 inches. I bobbed a little. McDougal threw a wild hook that missed me completely. I hit him again. His knees buckled, but he didn't go down. He was a tough street cop. Alex! I heard Betsy yell as she entered the yard. McDougal threw a pretty good punch, but he telegraphed it a little. It glanced off the side of my forehead. I hit him hard in the stomach. He doubled up, his face tight with pain. Betsy had come up to the two of us by now. So had a couple of other agents. I hit him in the stomach again, then a sharp uppercut right on the tip of McDougal's chin. He went down hard, face first, on the lawn. He stayed there. He was out. The next 2 days were draining and wildly frustrating. The 5 detectives were being held at the Metropolitan Correctional Center at Foley Square. I interviewed each of the detectives, starting with the youngest, Vincent O'Malley, and ending up with Brian McDougal, who appeared to be the leader. One after the other, the detectives denied any involvement in the Metro Hartford kidnapping and robbery. Hours after my initial interview with Brian McDougal, he asked to see me again. When the shackled detective was brought into the interrogation room at Foley Square, I had a feeling that something had changed. I could see it in his face. McDougal was visibly upset when he spoke. It's different than I thought it would be in jail. Sitting here, on the wrong side of the table. It's more a defensive game, you know. You try and hit the ball back over the net. You want anything, I asked him? Cold drink? Cigarette. I called for cigarettes to be brought into the interrogation room. Someone popped in with a pack of Marlboros, then immediately left. McDougal lit up, and he puffed luxuriously, as if smoking a Marlboro was the greatest pleasure the world had to offer. You know, I was a decent enough cop in the beginning, he said. It's when those first ideals go that you have to be careful. I'll try to remember, I said. Smoke drifted through his fingers. He sighed out loud. All right. Let me tell you what I'm looking for. I knew enough to listen, not talk. First of all, nobody got hurt from Metro Hartford. We've never hurt anybody on any of our jobs. What about the Buccieris, James Bartlett, Ms. Collins? I asked. McDougal shook his head. I didn't do those jobs. You know I didn't do them. I know you know. He was right. At least I didn't believe they had done the earlier jobs. The style was different for those. Plus, the detectives' attendance logs showed they had worked on several of the days when robberies took place. Okay, so where do we go from here? You also know that we want to get the person who set up the jobs. That's what we care about now. I know that. So here's my offer. It'll be hard for everybody to swallow, but it's non-negotiable. I want the best deal that I ever saw as a cop. That means witness protection inside a country club like Greenhaven. I'm out in 10 years maximum time. I've seen that same deal on counts of murder 1. I know what can be done and what can't be. I didn't say anything, but I didn't have to. McDougal knew I couldn't make the deal by myself. Let me hear the punchline, I said. What do we get from you? He stared into my eyes. In return,